Hey guys, what is up? My name is Kaylee and welcome back to my channel. The time has finally come. You get to hear about the worst slash most disappointing reads for me of 2018. Alright, so as you know, books are very subjective. The ones that I didn't like doesn't mean that other people didn't like it. Doesn't mean it's a terrible book, but for me, personally, didn't care for it. Most of these I finished, a couple of them I DNF'd. I don't think you'll be shocked about some of them, you might be shocked about others, so let's just get into my top 10 most disappointing reads of 2018. Coming in at number 10, we have Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. I'm not really shocked I didn't care for this. I gave it a 3-star. It was a generous 3-star. I did not care for Paula Hawkins' role on the train either, so I gave her second book a chance. I love a good thriller. I love a well-written thriller. The problems I had with Into the Water were that I didn't care. And if you want a thriller to be good, you really have to make the audience care about what happened that progresses the plot. When you don't care, you're just slogging through. Thrillers read pretty fast, so I didn't give up on it. I read it to the end. There was a lot of information to juggle. I didn't care much for the narrator or her point of view. And in the end, the surprise was not that great. For those reasons, I gave it like a 2.5, 3-star rating. I rounded up because the writing wasn't awful, but it wasn't great. I don't think I'm gonna give Paula Hawkins another chance. Coming in at number 9 is a graphic novel that a lot of people really love. I might still finish the series simply because my brother-in-law bought my niece the remainder of the volumes, of which there are only 4, and they're quick reads, so I might, if I'm really bored one day, ask to borrow them. And that is I Hate Fairyland Volume 1. A lot of people really love this series. I just did not care for it. The art was cool. I will give you that. I didn't like the narrator. I don't know what it is about the girl that goes into fairyland. It's about like a girl who goes into fairyland one day. I believe it's because she's bored. I read this halfway through the year. And the whole point of it is to find the key to get out, and she can't find the key. And you fast forward like 30-something years later. So it's just this little girl that's really in her 30s, and she's vulgar and she kills everything in sight. And theoretically it's cool, and it almost hit the mark for me, but it didn't quite. I can't really tell you what specifically about it I didn't dig. It just didn't work for me. I got really annoyed, I guess, with the input vulgarity. Like, it's not, they don't straight up swear. It's like watching The Good Place, but The Good Place does it well, where you're not actually swearing, you're just putting in words to replace it that are obvious. It ended up annoying me more than it was cute, so that's my synopsis. It wasn't my favorite. Number 8 is also a graphic novel, also a very polarizing one, and that is Snot Girl by Brian Lee O'Malley. I think that this year was the year that solidified that Brian Lee O'Malley and I just aren't on the same wavelength. I've read a couple of his graphic novels this year, and they're all misses for me. I wanted to love Snot Girl. The art, again, was incredible. As I've said before, I really like bright art. This was no exception. But the storyline is weird, and I don't feel like they know where they're going with the story as they're writing it. It was sort of pop culture-y. It was sort of fantastical, magical realism. The story follows a girl who's very allergic to everything. And she's a fashion blogger, so her friends are all pretty shallow and they don't really like each other. And she takes these experimental medications for her allergies, but they make her hallucinate, sort of. So she thinks maybe she committed a crime, but she's not sure. And then like the ghost of a person kind of haunts her, but you're not sure if it's a ghost or the person didn't die. And it got even weirder in the second volume, which I read hoping maybe it would tie together, and it just didn't. It fell short for me. I gave both volumes 3 stars. I don't think I'm going to continue again, like, I hate Fairyland unless I absolutely don't have anything else to read. It was a fail for me. Number 7, I'd say that, like, everything is polarizing because I feel like a lot of the books on my list are very loved by some people and I just didn't. And that is Leah on the Offbeat by Becky Albertelli. I've loved things I've read by Becky before. Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, The Upside of Unrequited. I absolutely love both of those, and I believe I gave them 4 or 5 stars apiece. And then this happened. Some people really love Leah on the Offbeat, and I think that Becky did some level of fan service where what was canon was then changed to fit what her fans really wanted, which involved Leah getting together with someone that didn't make sense from the Simon verse, in my opinion. I think she changed characters' personalities to fit the narrative. And while it was a quick read, and I think I did it in like 2 days, so I didn't waste a whole lot of time on it, I just wasn't happy with it. And from that point, you know, it kind of left a taste in my mouth where I'm not itching to read more of Becky's work yet. We'll see. But it was a miss for me. Leah seemed very whiny in the pages. I wanted to relate to her as an overweight bisexual girl. I really loved Leah in the first book. I shouldn't say first book, the Simon book, the companion novel. She was one of my favorite characters in Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, but her own story just didn't vibe for me. Number 6 is on a lot of people's favorites of the year, and it just wasn't mine, and that is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. People really, really loved this, and I really, really didn't. I love the first 100 pages. I sped through them. I was like, let's do this. I'm enjoying this. I can't snap. And then it just went south. One of my least favorite tropes, and as an aside, tropes happen in books because you can only tell so many stories of variation. But one of my least favorite tropes is when a relationship between people of any kind only progresses the plot because of miscommunication. And by that, I don't mean that someone said something and it was taken the wrong way. I mean, the way that Stella and Michael lacked communication didn't provide the foundation of the relationship they then got into. They basically spent the whole book not talking to each other. If they had just been honest about the fact that Stella had autism and that Michael had this secret that he was afraid she would disown him over, if they had just been upfront, they would have had like a good relationship from the beginning. But instead they just kept secrets from each other, and they both knew each other's secrets. That was like the part that drove me nuts. And it didn't affect how they saw each other. Like, I didn't like it. The miscommunication sucked. I thought that how they jumped into their sexual relationship, like, sure, she hires him. I should tell you a little bit about the plot. Stella is an autistic woman who decides she's going to hire an escort to get better at sex. She hires Michael. She kind of falls for him. He kind of falls for her, but they don't think that they're going to work together because of this information they're keeping from each other. So instead, they keep trying to break off the engagement that they have made, the agreement they have made, and instead they just keep prolonging it in order to fuck each other. I didn't dig it at all. I'm so excited to have own voices, representation of autism in a book. The spectrum is so wide. Her placement on the spectrum is not the one that I personally am familiar with, so I can't comment on it. People who relate to Stella thought it was really good, and I can appreciate that part of it, which is why I gave the book a 3-star. But literally, if you write a romance novel that is based almost primarily on miscommunication or lack of communication, I'm not going to be invested in it, and I wasn't. I don't like how it ended. I think it was too abrupt. I think that Michael was a little overpowering at times, and I really didn't appreciate the way that he forced Stella to do things sometimes. And I will not pick up the sequel. Number 5 is Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I was really excited to go into this, and to be completely fair, I still think about some of the plot devices, specifically the monetization of teeth, I guess I could say. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's about a girl that kind of travels between worlds. She's got a guardian more or less in a different world that she goes through the door to, and then she's got her own life in like the world that we would know and does her own thing, but the seraphim come and fuck up their world. That's basically it. That's the best synopsis I can give because I read the first book, and if you saw my best of, I love Laini Taylor's writing in Strange the Dreamer. I didn't care for it in Daughter of Smoke and Bone. And here's the thing that she does within Daughter of Smoke and Bone that I don't like within a story, and it's very specific, but when someone's trying to tell a story and something happens, I want it to be natural progression. But what Laini was doing often in the book, enough that I noticed, is that she'd say something like, there was an example of a girl who had like bushy eyebrows given to her by the main character. I'm reaching right now. But the background story for that occurrence happens after it occurs. Does that make sense? How do I explain this? Instead of a story happening linearly and an event occurring because of what you already know, Laini did a thing where she'd have an event occur and then be like, oh yeah, and this was because this event happened 6 years ago. And it was like a paragraph long. So instead of it happening in like a natural progression, an event would happen and then be explained real quickly. I hope that makes sense because it's something that I really, really don't like in writing. I think it's very lazy to have an explanation post an experience. I'm not being eloquent at all, and I hope that makes sense. I just don't think that it works. I think it makes the writing very choppy. I think it makes the story, the plot, not work cohesively, and I really don't like when that happens. And in The Daughter of Smoke and Bone, it happened often, and it didn't make me want to pick up the rest of the series. So I did just skip the other two, and thus the one made it to my list of most disappointing this year. Number 4 on my most disappointing reads is one that I just recently DNF'd this month, December 2018, and that is The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. I have heard a lot of things about this book. I very rarely hear just sheer love for it. I got this book for my birthday back in February. It's almost my birthday again. Jeez Louise. I was really excited for it. I kept putting it off, and then when I got into it in December, I was kind of enjoying it in the beginning, just a little bit, but I thought it was moving slowly. The pacing struggled for me. A lot of nothing was happening. And then just as it progressed, it got worse and worse for me. The main character is very unlikable, and I think that that can work sometimes, except when you really just don't like the person. She had very little redeeming quality. Understandably, her life was fucked up. She was, the main character was abducted in her youth because her grandmother is a famous writer of fairy tales, but in a weird sense because the book is out of print, so it's very niche and only a specific amount of people like really care about it, but those people are like big fans, and the fairy tales are real. So her and her mom have been running away from all of this bad juju that has come from the fairy tales her grandmother wrote, and finally her grandmother dies. Then her mom disappears, and the main character needs to go looking for her mother and find where the Hazelwood is. Okay, she's mean to everybody in her life. I was excited because the main male character in this book that she goes on this adventure with has both of my son's names in his name. So I thought that was cool. He goes by Finch, which is my baby's name. I was like really stoked to love this book, and I just didn't. She's so mean. She doesn't really have anything redeeming about her. She's pretty whiny. She's very woe is me. And I DNF'd it probably 65% through when magical stuff starts happening. I was just, the first half reads very contemporary with a little fantasy within it, and then you get to the point where she like gets to the forest, the Hazelwood, and no, it didn't work for me. At one point she just sprouts wings and flies. No, it wasn't seamless. It was choppy. The pacing was off. It was a very long journey to get to the fantasy, and then there was a lot of fantasy plugged in at once, and I didn't want to push through the remaining 35% just to say that I finished it. So I can't rate it. I would give it maybe a 2. I DNF'd it. At number 3 is The Vegetarian. The Vegetarian, I read this for, I believe, a contemporary-a-thon. I listened to the audiobook. It was weird. It was primarily a look at mental health and eating disorders, and I think that it was very strange. I can't really go into much more detail except that it follows a couple characters that are within each other's lives. It becomes very sexual at one point in a very weird way. I don't have any problem with sex in books, but this just did not do it for me. I was so glad that it was 1, short, and 2, that it ended. I gave it a 2-star. I don't have much more to say about it than that. Number 2, and I know my girl Lacey over at Lacey D. Bell loved this book, but I did not, and that is Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller. I'll link the wrap-up down below in which I kind of ranted about it, but it's basically about a pirate woman who's the captain of her crew, and she's the daughter of the Pirate King, and she's also part siren. So she uses her abilities to board and pillage ships. She's in search of a specific map for her father, the Pirate King, except everything kind of goes wrong. The things I did not like about it were that, 1, it was incredibly tropey. It was cliche. I could see where it was going. The plot devices were ones we've seen a million times. And again, you can do tropes right, and you can make them your own, and you can meld them to make a story that's worth reading. I did not find it worth reading. I didn't find it feminist. I found it sexist. I think that the character used her sexuality and her wiles to get what she needed, and it didn't do it for me at all. I was rolling my eyes. I didn't think she was a strong character whatsoever. I have no interest in continuing the series, and I only finished it because it read so fast. Yeah. So now we're moving on to my most disappointing read of 2018. This yet again had a whole wrap-up that I dedicated to the why I did not enjoy it and why I was disappointed by it. I will also link that down below. People loved this book so much, but I am starting to see people with the same opinion as me, which is that it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. I built it up real big in my head because it had a great year, and that is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I DNF'd it at 60 to 65% because insta-love happened between 2 characters that really shouldn't have fallen in love. There was absolutely no build-up. They were mortal enemies. I could not push myself any further after that, but mostly it was the writing leading up to that I just couldn't get into. I thought it was a little cliche. I thought it was lacking in building its magic. The things I did like about it weren't redeeming enough to continue. I liked the world. The first chapter was phenomenal. It really pulled me in, and then it hung me out to dry, honestly. I don't really know how I dislike it so much when so many people love it so much. No. Cliche left and right. Things I just couldn't buy into. I didn't care about any of the characters except maybe the princess. I think, yes, the characters were all very young and in their teens and acted as such, but that said, it felt like a perpetual tantrum was occurring between most of the characters. It was just tantrum-based plot progression, and things happened conveniently within it. I will likely be unhauling this along with the Hazelwood, along with the Kiss Quotient in the near future. It just wasn't for me, and I really wanted it to be. Obviously, I was not intending to pick up the sequel anyway, but no. So this is my worst read of 2018. So that's it for me, guys. That is my top 10 worst / most disappointing reads of 2018. I hope I didn't offend anyone too much, but as I said in the beginning, reading is subjective. These books just weren't for me. They might not have been for you either. If you've loved some of these, or especially if you did not love some of these, let me know in the comments down below. What was your least favorite book in 2018? Let me know. I'm always interested to see. I find it fascinating when people don't like the books that I loved and vice versa. So there you have it. Like if you've liked this video, subscribe if you're new here and you want more content from me. I have all of my social media linked down below so you can be friends on other platforms. I hope you're having a great day. Happy New Year. Bye.